Hi, it's Frank. Once again, we're working with chords, and specifically today we're going to be looking at some minor chord inversions, diatonic to the key of C. We're also going to look at how to construct a diminished chord, which is similar to minor, but with a crucial difference. So just to launch right off, we're going to go ahead and talk about things from the point of view of starting on the fifth string. This is very similar to what we did in the last video when I used the major chord starting with C. The reason for that is just because then we can visualize the shapes a little more easily as we move from root position, first inversion, and second inversion. Recall those terms are the ones that were introduced in the last video, so if they're still a little foggy, you might want to go back and just review some of that when we talked about root, first inversion, and second inversion in regards to major chords. Just a small shape change happens when we move to minor, but still it's an important one. So just to go ahead and begin with D minor. This is, recall, one of the chords we can get from the key of C major if we're sticking diatonic, meaning no sharps or flats in this case. So going up from D, we have to go a minor third. And this has been covered over the course of the last few videos. So again, you've probably already heard this. The idea is in the alphabet, the musical alphabet, if we're on the note D, we're going to skip the next note E to get to F. In the case of where I'm starting from, that gives me the fifth fret, fifth string, to third fret of the fourth string. From there, after I've done that, by the way, I've created the minor beginning of a minor triad, so I don't have to even think about that anymore. I know it's minor by default because of this shape. The next note, A, meaning I skip the G to get to it, if I'm going through that idea of the 5 notes in the musical alphabet, gives me a major third, right, F to A, so and that gives me 3 notes that sound like D, F, A, D as in dog minor. So as we did with the major triad, if I want to go ahead and create the first inversion of this note, the root, the lowest note to start with, has to move up an octave. Doing that would mean I could go from F to A to D as in dog on the third fret of the second string. So again, this note here on the fifth string, octave found there, and those 3 notes sound like that, with F on the bottom. This is still D as in dog minor in the sense that it has all 3 of the same notes, but I'm voicing it, as we say, differently. First inversion. From here, if I take the lowest note F and move it up to there, so from the third fret of the fourth string to the first fret of the first string, then what I have is this shape. A on the bottom, D as in dog on the second string, F on the first string. Some of you may recognize this if you're already familiar with first position chords as an open or first position D as in dog minor chord. Turns out that even with the D in the bass, and I said this in the previous video about major, this is still second inversion in terms of how the notes are being voiced. So that once again, to run through those, if we've got D here, F, A, that's our root position, D minor. If I've got now F in the bass to A to D on top, that's D minor, first inversion. And then if I put A in the bass, then D followed by F on top, that's D as in dog minor in second inversion. I could continue this all the way up like this. This would once again, as I've mentioned in the previous video, give me root position, in this case of D minor, but it would be an octave higher. So instead of the low note starting here on the 5th fret of the 5th string, the low note is now the 7th fret of the 3rd string. Again, all these shapes are contained in that PDF, so at the moment, if it's a little bit too much, don't worry, you can always review it after the fact, either via this video or using that PDF that's linked in the description. So just from there, I want to go ahead and say to create a diminished chord, which is the next kind of chord that we're going to talk about, we want to go ahead and take the basic minor chord shape that I just started with, D as in dog minor there, and we're going to change one thing about it. Instead of that A on top, we would flatten it so that it was actually a half step lower. All right? So you can see by doing that, if you think back to what we've been talking about working with chords, that I no longer have a shape that's either a major third to a minor third or a minor third to a major third. I now have a shape, meaning 3-note chord, that consists of a minor third going to another minor third. So that's what I meant way back when I first mentioned diminished chords and the fact they're built a little bit differently. That shape happens to be unique to diminished chords when you use those particular intervals. In other words, you go from the root up a minor third, and then from the third up another minor third to the 5th. In this case, the 5th is said to be flatted. Or, once again, you can think of it as being another minor third distance if you're thinking about the interval. So in the key of C, to keep the diminished chord diatonic, we have to actually start it on the note B as in boy. That's because of the fact that that particular location gives us a diatonic diminished chord just by stacking intervals in the way I just mentioned, from a minor third to another minor third. So down here, if I go from B as in boy up a minor third to D, that's where I am. That is to say, 2nd fret to 5th fret of the 5th string. I could also achieve that by starting my B note on the 7th fret of the 6th string and doing that. Now from here to go another minor third is a bit of a stretch, as you can see, because I have to go from here, 5th fret of the 5th string, to the 3rd fret of the 4th string. That's doable, but it's a little tough if you're not used to already stretching that far. So instead, and this is displayed on that PDF I've been referencing, you could actually find the note B here on the 14th fret of the 5th string. If you haven't been up that high yet, now's the perfect time to do it. The idea here is as we move up the neck, you've already noticed, I'm sure, the frets get smaller and closer together. So it's a little easier to make the kind of stretch that I did down here up higher. If I wanted to do that, I would still have the notes of the chord in mind. That is to say, B up a minor third means that I go to D as in dog. In this case, that would be the 12th fret of the 4th string. And then to go up another minor third, the distance of a flat 5 from the root, I would go from that D as in dog note to the note F on the 10th fret of the 3rd string. Now, a little tricky to voice that sometimes up there. Of course, I could always move the B to here and actually do it a little more easily here. This is strings 4, 3, and 2. But the reason I'm sticking here mostly is to be consistent with the other chords I've looked at previously in the other video as well as earlier in this one. Here's why. So from here, like that, turns out then to make the next inversion, meaning the first inversion of this chord, I just have to do that. There's my D as in dog, there's my F note, and there's the B thrown up an octave. Now, this shape is a lot more manageable, especially this far on the neck. It's 2 12th fret notes and a 10th fret, and you can reach them either like that, not using the second, or just using the first 3 fingers. This is the first inversion of the B diminished chord. Once again, if I take this note D, which is the 3rd, and move it up an octave, then I can create the next inversion by using that mini bar shape I alluded to in a previous video, where you take the 1 finger and cover all of 2, 3, 4, however many strings you want at a certain fret number. So in this case, I'm doing that, but I'm adding the note B via my ring finger. So the notes are F, B with the D as in dog note on the 1st string. That gives me the second inversion of this chord. Okay? So once again, B, D as in dog, F is root position, D as in dog, F, B is first inversion, F, B as in boy, D as in dog is the second inversion. I could actually continue this even further up if I wanted to create the same shape as this, an octave higher. Because of the nature of how the second string of the guitar is tuned, though, it requires a different shape. Again, this is something you may or may not want to explore. It's up to you, but the idea is first to locate the notes and understand how a diminished chord is built. And it's always built the same way, with minor thirds as the distance from one interval to the next. What you come to find is, technically, any sort of diminished chord can have a root that's any one of the notes, even as we extend outward into what's called diminished sevenths, which is the farthest you can go with a diminished chord. It's always going to have any note in the chord as the identifiable root. What happens when we start talking more about it in the context of a chord progression is deciding, well, how is this diminished chord getting out of and into the chords around it? That's what helps us define the root. But again, the way we're working with it at the moment is similar to what we did with the minor chord. We just want to be aware that we have a root position, a first inversion, and then a second inversion. All right? So there we have it, how we build minor chords as well as diminished chords, which are very similar but with a crucial difference, and different shapes that you can use to move around the neck with it. Again, the PDF I have linked in the description offers all this information at a glance, both in notation and tab, so feel free to download that and take a look at it as you revisit the video. Take care.